Hi guys, welcome to Monitoring and Evaluation Made Simple. I'm your host, Coach Alexander. Today we're going to be looking at a special topic, monitoring and evaluation reporting. How is it done and why? So I'm sure you've been in the M&E field for quite some time, just like me, or if you are new, you realize that M&E reporting is just important as any other activity, but it may be even more important than most activities. So we're going to briefly discuss about this. I'm going to show you how it's done and why you should do it. Okay, so I have these two books. If you haven't downloaded them yet, please do well to download them. They are free of charge. I've put the link in the description. So find time to download these two M&E books. One is called Learn Logical Framework Analysis, a step-by-step guide. Then you've got the Monitoring and Evaluation Beginner's Guide 2020. So I'll try by all means to be releasing new material for free, especially for those who are trying to build momentum in this profession. So this is quite a long video and I have timestamps. So as usual, you can use the timestamps to navigate to whichever part of this video you want to gain further insight, okay? So that you don't have to waste your time watching the whole video and watching things you might feel are irrelevant for you. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. So what is the M&E report, guys? Well, when we talk of the monitoring and evaluation report, just like any other report around the world, this report is a communication tool that is used to provide information on the progress of intervention in relation to planned activities. So you see, this report basically, it just tells stakeholders, it tells even the organization and the people that you are basically going to provide this information to that indeed the project is working, the project is gaining ground. What you spent in money, in form of money, is actually yielding results. But this is where sometimes we get it all wrong, because it's not all the time that we want to see good results, okay? Actually, it's actually good if it's also an advantage on your part if you're able to spot out the negative results, because when you see negatives, it gives you that opportunity to correct a mistake and it helps with learning. And it's how we learn that this can translate to improved future project planning. Okay, so the lessons learned can actually help in future project planning. So now there's something we need to understand here is that the M&E report is really dependent on the project document, program document, and strategic plan. And why do I say that? It's simply because these documents have the key performance indicators, which I've always talked about. So whenever you're doing a report, make sure you don't spend time reporting on things that are not really answering the needs of the project. Okay, because the project has clearly defined indicators that you should be reporting on, you should be communicating to other people. This is some of the things why, this is the reason why sometimes it's never really easy dealing with independent consultants, because you'll find that if you hire a consultant maybe to do an evaluation of your project, in my experience I've discovered that they'll tend to come up with a really bulky report, and that report may not have the things that are really answering the project clearly. Of course, there'll be information that responds to the project, but we need something that is clear. We need something that is tied to the indicators that are in the project or strategic plan. So it's always good to make that clear to anyone you're hiring. And even as you are doing the report, make sure that it is responding to the needs of the program. So why is M&E reporting done? Okay, it's the same reason why we are actually doing monitoring and evaluation activities. Actually, the M&E report just fits in. It's more of an end product of what we do. as professionals, because in M&D you have different activities. You've got the actual monitoring where you are actually collecting data, analyzing it, and reporting on it. But then you've got the evaluation part, which is also similar to M&E, also similar to the monitoring, except that it is done usually on 3 points of the project cycle. Okay, so these are the reasons I have in front of you. Management needs to be better informed of what is happening on the ground. And the performance of a project is really critical. I always talk about this, guys. When it comes to, let's say, we look at donor aided projects. Let's say you've got the US government funding activities in Africa. You'll find that this money they are using to fund those activities are coming from taxpayers. Okay, taxpayers, they have to cut people's money, incomes. They have to cut incomes of their citizens to fund these projects. So there's that sense of accountability. People need to know whether their money is being used for the intended purpose, whether it is really yielding results. They deserve to know. Then it also provides information on the strengths and weaknesses of a project. Now, there is no perfect project around the world, and this is something you can prove. You can walk down memory lane, think about the projects you've witnessed, you've been an eyewitness to. You can agree with me, there are weaknesses. Sometimes, we tend to see more of the weaknesses than the strengths. So when you are able to understand what the strengths are, it's a good thing. When it comes to the weaknesses, I think it's even better, because think about it. If there were no weaknesses, we wouldn't have any urge to improve on a project. We wouldn't even want to improve on it because we think it is so perfect. And yet, perfection is not possible in the current scenario of things. So what an M&D report does, it does give the strengths and weaknesses, and that is why even when you're coming up with this report, if you're an M&D coordinator, M&D officer, be sure to just be honest about what is on the ground. And the honesty is key if you want to see improvement in the long term. Okay, so now, like I mentioned, you see all these points you're going to realize are quite interlinked, because if you look at the third point, it says provides information that can be used for better planning of future projects. So when you understand the weaknesses of your project, it gives you that sense of where the loopholes are. And in order for you to improve in the future, you need to seal those loopholes. And once you do that, the next project you implement will be better because you would have solved the problems in the previous project. But it's not just about future projects. Even as the project is running, changes can be made. And that is why I talked about the evaluations that are done in many of these projects. And some of these evaluations are done midway project implementation. And the reason why they do it midway is because they want to be able to understand what they have achieved at that point. And if they are to achieve better, what can they do? What changes can they make? And then, as I earlier mentioned, these things are interlinked. Helps promote transparency and accountability. So when we talk of transparency, all stakeholders need to know what is actually happening. All right. So the only way they are able to know is when you generate these reports. So a report can be generated and distributed to the public. It could be given to the donors. It can be given to internal staff. These results shouldn't be hidden. Because what happens if things are hidden, things are not transparent? You discover that there will be trust issues among stakeholders. Let's say you have a donor funding a certain project, and this project team is not giving the report, or they could be giving the report, but that report is not coming on time. It's always late. And because of all those issues, trust becomes a huge issue, a huge problem. Donors might be thinking that could it be that they are cooking figures? There's so many uncertainties that develop, that build. So to avoid all those issues, stick to what is required when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to accountability. So how often is M&D reporting done? So it really depends on what you're doing. So there are two things you could be doing. Are you doing monitoring or are you doing the evaluation? So monitoring, friends, is usually done. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be semi-annually, it could be annually. But in my experience, it is not really done. It's usually not done weekly, but monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, that's when it's done. So now you discover that if you're doing these monitoring reports, and I sure hope you understand the difference between monitoring and evaluation. Because when you're doing monitoring, monitoring is done regularly. You're regularly collecting data, and these activities you're doing, the things you're monitoring, these are activities that are regularly done. Let's say, for instance, trainings. You want to track the number of trainings done monthly. Let's say you're training women in order to become more empowered in what they do. Those trainings could be scheduled in such a way that they are done monthly. So if those trainings are scheduled in such a way that they are done monthly, then you may have to be doing the monitoring monthly. So for purposes of aggregation, you may choose to, because notice here, you see it's done monthly, but you may choose to generate the report quarterly, okay, for purposes of proper aggregation. Or you may choose to aggregate the data semi-annually or annually. But still, whatever the case, it's really dependent on the resources you have as an organization. That's how you determine how often you can do these monitorings. So it's dependent on the resources, it's dependent on the activity itself. Like I said, trainings could be done on a monthly basis, but sometimes trainings could be done only twice a year, and that's when you need to do the monitoring. You can only do it twice a year. Now if you're doing an evaluation, really, guys, in my experience, it's done at 3 points. You've got the baseline, because I hope you understand that a baseline survey is actually a type of an evaluation. Then you've got the midterm evaluation, which is done midway through the project. Then you've got the end of project evaluation. Okay. So you can see that if you're doing an evaluation, it's done at 3 points in the project cycle, usually. Okay. So who does the M&D reporting? So for monitoring, it's done by the implementation staff. So usually the monitoring, when monitoring is being undertaken, the implementing organization obviously has a system in place whereby staff are on the ground collecting this data. All right. So when they collect this data, they analyze it and report on it. But how is evaluation done? Usually, usually, guys, all evaluations are done by external independent, all right, consultants. So you have to keep this in mind, and this is what makes M&E what it is. Because if you can imagine if the evaluation was done by the implementing staff, would there be any learning? I'm telling you the truth, there wouldn't be any learning because the staff who are doing the evaluation are assessing activities they themselves have been implementing. So, in order to stimulate learning, this is not the right way to do it. It's only permissive for staff, implementing staff, to do an internal evaluation if those evaluation findings are going to feed into the external evaluation. That is when it becomes okay. But if you're going to say that I'm doing an evaluation and this evaluation is the final evaluation because it's internal, then you're not going to stimulate learning and you're not going to get a true picture due to biasness. So how is monitoring and evaluation done? All right, how is the M&D reporting done? So I've talked about this so many times, and M&D is not hard, guys. You can complicate things if you want to complicate things, but to tell you the truth, it's not hard. It can get difficult at times because there are so many things that can affect a good report. But the key is to identify the key performance indicators. And to get those key performance indicators, you need to look at the project document. If the project doesn't have any project document in place, you need to go to the logical framework. If there is no logical framework, try looking at the organization's strategic plan because that's where the indicators could be. So it becomes difficult to implement M&E if you don't have indicators in place. Trust me on this one. It becomes really difficult to do so. So now, after you've identified these key performance indicators, you need to develop the data collection tools. So those tools are going to help with the actual collection of data. So that's the next stage you do. You develop those tools, you go out in the field and collect the data. There are different kinds of data, by the way. You've got the primary data, you've got the secondary data, qualitative, quantitative, all right, whichever kind of data it is, you just have to collect because that is what is responding to the strategic plan. So after you collect the data, you analyze it, all right? But between these two stages, the collection and analyzing, there is data entry here. I didn't put it there. I thought that is something that is straightforward because when you collect, you have to enter it and analyze that data. So after you've analyzed it, you now compile the monitoring and evaluation report. Okay, guys. So that is all you do. So now the monitoring and evaluation report is more of a standard report. I'm sure you've read a lot of reports in your time. If you were at the university, you may have done a final year thesis. And this is basically how the report, the M&D report should look like. So the whole purpose of coming up with this kind of structure is because at the end of the day, when you have done your analysis, you've done your introduction, objectives, methodologies. This is very important, this part, findings all the way down to the recommendations. Because when you present the findings, you're simply telling stakeholders what is there currently. And then after you've analyzed those findings, in the findings you also do an analysis, sorry, and then you conclude and then you make recommendations. Okay, sorry about that. So that's basically what you do. So the recommendations have to explain what you think should be done to improve the project. And that is what M&E really is all about. It is about making sure that what you found in findings, if there are bad results, you offer recommendations for improvement. So this is the time I had for you guys. This is where I end today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on monitoring and evaluation reporting. So please be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so, and also enroll in some of my courses, my online courses. Until we meet again, I've been your host, Coach Alexander, and see you on the other side. Bye.